There's so many things to art that you're very unlikely to ever know all there is to it. And even harder can be finding those small things you haven't heard about yet. It happened to me so many times before that I watch a video or see a post where they say something just as a side note that is so simple yet so important, and I think every beginner should already know. Yet, I have never heard about it despite doing art for many years. Hopefully this video can be that moment for you. If you're an experienced artist, you might already know some of the concepts and tips I'm going to talk about today. Now let's begin. For starters, there's more to line weight than you might think. Most artists here probably know the term line weight already. It's the thickness and intensity of the lines in your artwork, and you might already have some idea on how to use it. But there's many things you can use it for that you might not know about. And here's some of them. You can use thick lines for the silhouette of your art, for example a character, to make them pop more. This is one of the most common ways artists use thick lines, especially when they upload line art or sketches. Similar to that, you can go one step further and separate different objects from each other with thicker lines. That could include clothing of a character, for example. Another common method is to use thicker lines for shadows. Now, if you're struggling with knowing where the shadows are in your line work, look for areas where your lines intersect. It's often a sign that you'll have some shadows there. It's not always applicable, nor the best solution, but it's a good start if you otherwise don't know where to use thicker lines. But what some artists forget about is that thinner lines can be used to make areas look lit up. See how these faint lines can give the effect of light hitting the subject? And the last way of using line weight that I'm aware of is distance. You can use thicker lines to make an object look closer and thinner lines to make them appear further away from the viewer. I'm not aware of a rule that says you can't be using all of those methods together, so go ahead and mix and match them as you see fit. There's no right or wrong answer for which one is the best, but this just shows you there's more you can accomplish by just varying your line weight than you think. The right answer was this one, by the way. Another important concept to be aware of is that of tangent lines. A tangent line in art describes parts of your art where the lines interact in a distracting manner, such as when they barely touch. You usually would like to avoid them as they can steal the focus of your artwork and generally can look a bit jarring. Some examples include a line barely touching the edge of another object or the canvas, a line going parallel to another line for separate objects, or several lines intersecting or converging into one point. Keeping tangent lines in mind and trying to avoid them can significantly improve your art. But not all tangent lines are bad. Like many things in art, it depends on what your goal is. You can, for example, use tangent lines purposefully to create discomfort or unease in your piece. If you'd like to know more about tangents, you're also likely interested in other tangential topics, such as balance, framing, and composition as a whole. I highly recommend you to look up cinematographers and photographers on YouTube for those topics, as those are the people that live and breathe by these concepts. There's plenty of useful resources by them on YouTube, whether it's tutorials or movie analysis. Wait, let's talk about values. As artists, we get taught to always check our values, so that we can just focus on the contrast of the piece to check if the brightness levels look balanced. When digital artists want to check values of their piece, they often just turn down the saturation of the piece to 0 and check the brightness levels that way. But what you might have noticed when you're doing that and switch back and forth between the gray and the regular version, that something always seems a bit off about it. Like areas that you thought look way darker or brighter in the original suddenly look a lot more dull in the grey version. Well, that happens because with Clip Studio Paint and possibly other art programs, this method will not give you the perceived brightness of a color. Yellow, for example, looks brighter to us humans than blue for the same value, but to a computer they will be the same. A more reliable way to check your values that is closer to what we actually perceive would be to create a new layer on top of your piece, fill it in black, and set the layer mode to color. As you can see here, the brightness feels more accurate to what we are actually perceiving in the original, compared to if we just turn down the saturation. It's not a perfect solution either, as you can see by this very dark approximation for the blue, but it's still more accurate than having them all be the same shade of grey. Feel free to try it out on your own art and see what happens. Now, any questions?
Yeah, why does this work exactly? Like, why is it different if you use the color layer method instead of just turning down the saturation?
This one is big, very big. Properly utilized, it will change the way you make art forever. Small, medium and large is a concept where you make sure that whatever you're drawing has distinct small, medium and large areas or shapes instead of everything being roughly the same size. Adding a slim bell to a character design, for example, can do a lot to split up a single big shape into a more interesting design. This concept is also known as the 60-30-10 rule in, for example, interior design. This ratio tells us roughly how we should distribute our shapes. 60% should be made up of the big shape, 30% should be made up of the medium and 10% of the small shapes. Funnily enough, this isn't only applicable for creating more interesting shapes and designs. We can also apply this concept to colors. Let's look at those boxes again from earlier and fill them in with colors. Just like with the shapes, this image will look more interesting due to the amount of the colors used being directly related to the size of the shapes. While remembering the 60-30-10 distribution is good, it's not like you have to follow it exactly. Whether you use that ratio or let's say 71-23-6 is not that important. What matters is that you have distinct large, medium and small areas in your art. Variation is king. For anyone that wants a more detailed explanation, I left a link in the description to a video that will give you more insight into the topic. Unless I forgot to. And here's some quick honorable mentions that will especially be helpful for beginners. When selecting a shadow color, it helps to shift the hue of the base color a little, either to the left or to the right, and select a darker color from there for the shadow. This helps especially if you're struggling with muddy looking shadows. Flip your canvas. It's an easy and quick way to see mistakes in your art. This includes seeing a misaligned eye, for example. And the last and most useful tip of them all, add rim lights. If you don't know how to give your artwork a finished look, rim lights are the quickest and easiest way to turn an okay artwork into a better okay artwork. Just create a new layer on top of your piece, fill it in with a dark color of your choosing, often a dark blue. Switch the layer mode to multiply, erase some of the edges where you want light to shine, reduce the opacity to your liking, and voila! Since you're using a multiply layer on top, it will help your colors to look more cohesive if they weren't before as well. Okay, hopefully there were some new things you were able to take away from this video. If there's any other concepts or tips that you think should be included and could help other artists, please share it in the comments with everybody. I'm sure there's still a lot of things that even I'm not aware of that could help me. Now, I want to thank all of my supporters here. You also can support me through Twitch, Ko-fi or Patreon. You can also support me for free just by joining my live streams here on YouTube or Twitch. Thank you everyone for watching and have a nice day. Bye!